Yes, hello, I'm Tim, lovely to meet you, and thank you to the team at Hallam for the invite today. And for all of those who thought they would escape a recruitment consultant for the day, we really do get everywhere. I'm really excited today to talk you through a few tactics that search companies and recruitment companies use in finding amazing teams and building great teams, so that I can hopefully give you some takeaways from today for when you're building your own teams. Before we start, however, I want to just see if anybody remembers this. Anyone remember this? Fab. Okay, so for those that do, great. For those that don't, this is actually an art installation in the Guggenheim called Can't Help Myself. So very, very simply, I mean, obviously fabulously evocative, but a machine, a robotic arm that's surrounded by a red viscous liquid in a glass box. So the liquid clearly runs away from the arm, and when the sensors detect that the liquid's gone too far, it uses 32 pre-programmed movements to scoot the liquid back towards it, endlessly. Obviously amazing. I've not been, I should say. Most of my cultural stuff these days with three young kids is via Twitter, which is where I found this actually, because it went viral. Now, in terms of the meaning behind this, there's obviously lots of depth to it. So what does this tell us? Is this an exercise on automated reality? Does this talk to us about people and our relationship with machines? Or is this a really deep and meaningful political statement about borders and migration and sovereignty? Probably all of those things. But for a cautionary tale of our time, why it became famous was totally the wrong reasons, and everybody got it wrong. So people thought that this was hydraulic fluid which was leaking out, and the machine was desperately trying to save itself. However, the reason why I'm talking about this today, tenuous segue nearly complete, this to me is all about limited resources. This machine has no supply of this red viscous liquid which it's desperately trying to contain. And why this is meaningful for me is that this is how I view a lot of the businesses that we work with. Huge amounts of effort goes into retention. And there are levers that businesses can pull when they need to bring on board new liquid. But there isn't a continuous supply of it. And there's not a lot of thought sometimes that goes into that. So I'm going to cover a few tactics today that I can help. Before we do that, what I want to do is talk about, or to go through what I'm not going to cover. Okay. Clearly, I'm talking to you for 15, 20 minutes. So what I cannot do is go through an entire recruitment strategy. I should add, I have worked nearly 20 years in agency recruitment, and that's some of the biggest UK recruitment agencies, working with some of the biggest firms globally, supplying quite literally thousands and thousands of people. And I've worked with some of the most demanding clients in the world, and some of them I know are in this room here. So this is what I can't cover with you today. But there's a fascinating thing about a recruitment strategy, which is that every business I speak to says, yes, we've got a recruitment strategy. Yes, we work very hard on our recruitment strategy. And our recruitment strategy is always on. So the question that I have, and have asked many clients over 20 years being a very, very hands-on recruiter, this is one of the questions that I usually ask at the end of understanding whatever problem it is that we're trying to solve. When do you need this problem fixed by? When do you need this role hired by? If every business that I talk to has a great recruitment strategy, and that recruitment strategy is always on, why is the answer to this question always, immediately, yesterday, ASAP? So what I want to do then and how we answer that question is by understanding a little bit more about how businesses work with active and passive talent. And what I mean by this is what we have are two groupings of talent, clearly those who are very, very open to work and those that are absolutely turned off. And just to give you a few statistics, 70% of the global workforce is made up of passive talent. These people aren't going to come anywhere near you under any circumstances unless you go to them. 30% therefore is active, okay? And those are the people that you are hiring if you are just using stock standard levers to pull when it comes to recruitment, even with a good recruitment strategy. If you press, and actually I should qualify that further by saying that's an incredibly lucrative industry. You know, there are high street recruitment companies set up in the UK that just filter through those active job seekers and send CVs out. You will have all had them, right? That industry is worth about £18 billion a year. So it's big. But even if I step away from agency world for a second, and we start to talk to some of the talent teams that are embedded within businesses, talent teams will say, well, actually, we've got lots and lots of ways that we can tap into passive talent as well. And employee referrals are our most unique and best and valuable source. And actually, they will then go on to say that other high street agencies are their least valuable. On average, a talent acquisition professional will spend 1/3 of their working week working on a role for now. And anyone who's worked with talent professionals will know they're really busy, right? They're not just working on one role. They're usually working on dozens. And I spoke to somebody the other week who was working on 100 open vacancies. So how are they doing anything which has a longer tail to it? And then again, the average length of the hiring process, mostly driven by businesses, you know, those of us who run businesses, run departments, we want these problems solved now. So we drive this. 36 days is the average length of the hiring process in the UK. So when we're asking ourselves, are we attracting active or passive talent as a business to our team or our department? The answer is employee referrals are active. I've had this argument many a times. How these conversations work is friends in a coffee shop, in a pub, I'm pissed off with my job, I want to leave. My company's amazing, come and work for us. That is an active candidate. They were already in the process of leaving. That's not an active headhunting exercise. Talent acquisitions professionals spending 1/3 of their week working on an open vacancy, they will only uncover people that are looking now because they need to move on to the next role. And the average length of the hire is 36 days. If you get someone into your team within a month, they were already looking. So the big question then, and the tactics that I'm going to help you with today, which will hopefully give you a hand next time you are hiring, how do we target that 70%? Okay. So how business doesn't help itself is with this concept of, and as I say, I've managed lots and lots of recruiters. I've managed departments and teams of up to about 75 recruiters. And some of those are embedded internally, some of those are externally. But a recruiter should always be busy. But that isn't the same as always on. You don't have an always on recruitment strategy just because your talent team or those external recruiters you use are always busy. All they're doing is looking at their feet and working really hard, but they're not thinking about that passive talent group. So what I'm going to do now is give you 4 tactics. And these tactics will mitigate, they won't remove altogether, but hopefully they will mitigate the need for you to hire reactively, as in, this is a surprise, I've got to fix this, and I need to fix it now. Now that's not to say that reactive hiring is a bad thing. It's absolutely not. It can be a brilliant thing, but at best, it's expensive. Because any service that you need delivered at speed and well, someone's going to charge you a lot of money for. So now the next few slides, this is a recruiter who's hopefully going to try and save you some money. So tell all your friends. Okay, tactic 1, talent ecosystem. So this is a really easy conversation starter for us. We're usually brought on board to build teams, so greenfield projects, new teams, new capability, that's our sweet spot. So where we start is, I'm sure everyone in this room will be aware of who your competitors are. But how many of you in this room are aware of the businesses where talent tends to flow from? So we call these feeder businesses. Very simple. So across a whole business, there tends to be a little grouping of companies that tend to supply. They're not often the ones you think they are. They're not your closest competitors. And actually, I was listening to Matt a couple of speeches ago in here talk about brand and the importance of not just copying other businesses that you're aware of. And that's so relevant here. You know, and I've seen it over so many different businesses where if you just try and poach the staff of your closest competitors, you just all end up as this homogenous blob, all doing the same thing with no different ideas. So we really, really push the businesses we work with to actually say, do you really need someone who's worked in a really similar company? Why? Why don't you embrace new ideas within this business? So I'm sure some of you will be aware of these companies and you'll be thinking, actually, I know those, Tim. But how many of you are aware of the feeder companies to your feeder companies? And you see where I'm going with this. So if we extrapolate out, one of the things that we do is talk to businesses. This is your ecosystem. This is how talent flows around your business. And then what you can do, and this is very blurred and I'm sorry about that, but you can see some of these are surrounded by little clouds. The minute you then start laying on top and saying, right, which of these businesses have products that we like, have training systems that we like, have similar geography, similar pay scales, we can then really easily find half a dozen companies and say, right, those are the businesses that you should really be keeping tabs on. Those are the companies that will help you build amazing teams. Clearly, if we're talking about being proactive in the recruitment market, which is really what this is all about, you know, moving away from just letting the talent come to you, you've got to go front foot. There's no way that you can deal with all of these companies, but you might be able to hone in on a couple of people in those businesses. So this is your where, okay? I don't think I can go. Okay, this should be laying one down on top of each other. So I'll walk you through this because this is a particular example of skill pool mapping that we've done recently with a Benelux tech firm that we've worked with. So one of the most important exercises for us when we're dealing with a new business or a new client, the first conversation we will have is, okay, never mind what you're hiring for now, what's the most important skill set within your business, not for you thriving, but for your very survival? What do you need? What's your lifeblood? What's your red viscous liquid? And this business here, if you see the orange circle, they said, software development managers, you know, our whole business is stacked on really good hands-on dev. Okay, fine. And they said, but that's fine, we're okay. There's 80,000 of those people in Europe. And they're right, there's 80,000 people, so that looks okay. But the reason we do this exercise is we say to them, what you've got to try and understand, it's not okay just to have that. You've got to understand all the other layers that you place on those, all the other requirements. And as you can see here, they also then said, green circle, well, we're based in Luxembourg. So they've got to do at least 2 days a week in the offices in Luxembourg. So that number immediately drops down to about 1,400 up here. They then will also say, well, we're really hands-on, you know, so we want people who have done recent hands-on PHP and JavaScript. Okay, this is getting a bit extreme now. And then finally, the team's multilingual, so they've got to be English and French speakers. So bearing in mind, these are business leaders we're talking to that are saying our whole strategy for growth is based on being able to attract these people. And I say to them, well, there's 143 people in the world that you're basing your whole business strategy on. Now that's fine, but how are you messaging those people? What are you doing proactively to make sure that they think you're a good business? And one of the worst examples that we've come across is, yeah, I'm sure you've all come across good and bad recruiters, right? I'm not here to bash the recruitment industry, far from it. But if you engage with loads and loads of recruiters, and they're all speaking to these 143 people on your behalf, failing to get back to them, really poor service, not giving them feedback, by the time you really want them, you're not going to be able to get hold of them, and they're not going to be interested. Talent tribes. So this will be of no surprise to the marketers in the room, of course, but what we do here is just really try to understand different persona, okay? So what I mean by that is one vacancy, one job spec is a totally nonsensical thing. It's got no personality to it. And there are lots of different groups of people that can fill a role. So we ask a few questions. We say, what are the identifiers? So clearly what defines these people? What's their market sentiment? So picking up on the stuff before. What do they think of you and why? Have they seen a lot of stuff on Twitter they don't like? What do they think? How to engage. So different groups of people engage with the market in really different ways. Some people do all of their future job selection via Twitter. Some do it via LinkedIn. Loads now do it via LinkedIn. Some by job boards. I've worked in some markets where people are just completely dark. I mean, I've done loads and loads of stuff in defence industries where you just cannot find people. So it's all through networks. And then finally, their typical needs. What motivates them now into a job? What motivates them in 18 months and 3 years? And then what we then are able to do is then say to the businesses that we work with, and just to go, so this is a freelancer. So actually, if you've got that vacancy, but you need someone now, or it's a project requirement, or you don't need any collaborative work, this is how you engage with the freelancers. This is how you engage with the upwardly aspirational, that group of people that might grow into a role. This is in this case, monolinguists. These are the people where you might be a bit flexible with one of your requirements, and then they're your perfect profilers. So it gives you your language. So this is your language for how to select. Now, finally, the fourth tactic, building on your first three. So now you've got your where, you've got your volume or your number of people, and you've got your language. We talk to people about making sure you've got utility, okay? So clearly, no presentation on, well, with tactics in the title would be complete without a really cheesy football analogy. So this is Fantasy League football. So for those of you that don't know anything about Fantasy League football, this is basically selecting a team every week. You populate your team, and you also, crucially, have a bench. So we encourage people to think about their bench. Now, clearly in business, it's not practical to swap people in and out week on week. Your team is your team. However, what's crucial about Fantasy League is that these people don't necessarily need to be like for like. So actually, you might not necessarily have, a midfielder who's exactly the same. It's people who are of a high enough standard to be part of your team, but actually might not necessarily fit perfectly. And we encourage all of the clients we work with to hold and develop those utility relationships. Use the maps and then target 2 or 3 key people and talk to them. You reach out to them. And we call this hypothetical hiring. Now, if you reached out to someone who you really liked, you've either, and you were trying to hire them, you've either got a job or you haven't. So that conversation can be a bit weird, because actually they don't necessarily want to give the game away. You don't want to say, oh, I'm hiring because there's someone at the moment who we're not sure about or whatever. You can't do that. But when you do, 1 minute, thank you. When you do hypothetical hiring, what I advocate is that you speak to these people, 2 or 3 people, and you say to them, look, we think you're great. We've seen your work. We love it. We're not hiring right now, but at a point in the future, we want you. What would you think to that? Under what circumstances would you be interested in coming to work for us? You would be astonished at the levels of engagement that you get from key people who don't necessarily fit in the structure in your business now. But what you will find is that you can curate a couple of really good relationships, which might, if the worst happens one day and suddenly you find yourself hiring, you're one phone call away from. So, and sorry, just down here I was saying, keep in mind you can play in different formations, but for the football nerds in the room, this was the first football formation, which was 1-1-8. So we definitely don't recommend that. And then in summary, build your talent ecosystem. Understand how talent flows around your business. Investigate skill pools. What are the volumes for these business critical skills that you need? Decipher these talent tribes. What kind of identity do you want for people in and out of these different roles? And then finally, if everybody leaves here today and thinks, right, I'm going to curate 2 utility relationships, I absolutely guarantee you, if you do that, you will save yourself loads and loads of cost, either cost by time from your talent team or cost of using external recruiters. Fab, thanks for your time.